I was born in 1930, which of course was the height of the Depression, and life was pretty hard for everybody in those days. But when you lived on a farm, you had your butter, your milk and your meat and vegetables. You didn't realise there was didn't realise there were shortages. When we grew up, there was always plenty of everything. And so we grew in a healthy manner. It's like a village, only we lived a bit further apart than you do in a village. And we would meet at weekends, etc., and on ponies or on bikes. And Ercildoune Station provided a lot of fun because there was the swimming hole, there was the tennis court, and we used to ramble up through the back there and up to the waterfalls and so forth. And so we were sort of known as the soldier settlers. And we had a lot of fun. We grew up well. Well, there was 12 of us settled on the Ercildoune Road, although there were some that were further up over the hill, the Glenbrae, Addington, Warburg area, whereas we were part of the Burrumbeet, Ercildoune area. We had a piano teacher who used to travel along the district, and she would give piano lessons and that. We had a piano. My three sisters all learnt the piano, and my two oldest learnt from Mrs. McManamy. The third sister, she couldn't teach her. She said to my mother one day, "I can't teach Dawn anything. All she wants to do is jazz the scales, you name it, she jazzed it. She's just a natural, she had that natural attribute." We did our schoolwork by candlelight or Aladdin lamps, where you filled the lamps with kerosene, and it was our jobs on Saturday mornings, clean the shoes, always ready for school on Monday, and clean the lamps and trim the wicks and fill the lamps so that we always had them. No electricity, that didn't come until after the war. But as I said, we never knew we were what you would probably call deprived now, but we didn't know. We grew up with that sort of thing. Harvest time, well, there was always the itinerant men that came along and worked in the harvest. Our fathers, they sowed crops, potatoes, because they were a good sale item. We always wore overalls and long trousers, of course. We were never in shorts except in the hot weather, But on the farm you wore long trousers most times, and you tied string round the bottom of your trousers because the mice used to run around, and you tied string round the bottom of your trousers to stop the mice from running up your legs. One of the soldiers, he used to sometimes, he would get his gun and he would march around his farm with his gun over his shoulder, and we would say, "Oh, Harry's gone troppo." Now, of course, we understand post-traumatic stress, and he really had it because that happened fairly often. My father tells the story that Harry come to be wounded. They had lined the men up in the battalion, and they called for volunteers to go over the top. They were really, you understand, going over the top, of course, is going out of the trench and over the top. And they lined them up and said, "Right, we want volunteers to go first over the top." And Dad said nobody stepped forward, so they went along and said, "You, you, you and you." And because he was a big man, he was given this big piece of carpet to carry, to throw over the barbed wire, so the others could go follow him and go over. And he said that he'd gone forward and he'd thrown the carpet over the wire, and of course the Germans began to shoot and so forth, and he was wounded with some shrapnel in his left thigh, and that's where his mate Blake Miller was killed, and he lay on the ground waiting. Well, of course they were fighting for a number of hours. He lay on the ground wounded for some hours, And eventually it all quietened down, and these two stretcher bearers came to pick him, and others picked them up and collect the, I think there was about 6 killed on that day. And he said they had just put him on the stretcher and had lifted him up, and the Germans began shelling, and the two bearers dropped him on the ground, and there was a little building a bit further away, and they ran over to the building for shelter, and it was hit and blown up, and they were killed. So he had another 3 or 4 hours out on the ground, out waiting, etc. But eventually they did get him into the field hospital, and then he was slowly transferred from one hospital to another. And that's about as much as we got out of him. He would not speak about the war. There were no boys in our family, and that's one of the reasons why the girls, we were sort of, we two youngest, Dawn and I, we were more free, whereas the two oldest were there to help Mum. You know, it was one of those things, and I just loved being outdoors anyhow. I still say I'll grow it if someone else would cook it for me.